One of the most interesting things that came out of my conversation with Sophia was how other adults didn't even know how to interact with her as a child, since most small talk between adults and children is about school. Luckily, the only thing on my schedule on July 17th was my 9:30 a.m. interview with Jillian Coulter because it lasted 7.5 hours. As we explored the self-directed education terrain, and then some, there is way too much content to synthesize. What I would like to emphasize is how exhilarating it was for me to talk to someone who was clearly a deep thinker, versed in self-directed education, and willing to take the conversation wherever it was headed for as long as we were both engaged. Eventually, dinner needed to be made, and we were hitting our threshold anyway. Here are some highlights from our conversation. In explaining the difference between Manhattan Free School to Longview School, both of which her son attended, she emphasized the difference the central visionary makes in reference to Marc Jacobs. Since freedom is such an important concept to me, her mention of Mandela moments and that it was his time in prison that taught him to be free made an impact on me. In reference to her reliance on experts in her son's early years, she said, "The worst thing that we did was too much," which leads to how she sees self-directed education. The less we do, the more happens. Jillian was currently on the South Fork of Long Island, but will be headed back to the West Coast soon. 3 days after our conversation, I had to go to Long Island for a family party, and so I took one ferry from Connecticut to the North Fork, and Jillian took the ferry from the South Fork to the North Fork, and we met for breakfast and got to take this picture. That was really cool. My favorite quote from Jillian was related to this theme that came up throughout my conversations. And she said, "Awareness is the threshold of choice." The 3 older interviewees could all articulate how they became aware of self-directed education and the factors that made them, or the people they observed, choose it. The consensus seems to be that adults need to trust themselves first in order to trust children. This leads me to question, if children don't learn to trust themselves, which I don't believe they do in school, are they able to trust others? Does the prevalence of experts and teachers make us question our own judgment? Was another question related to trust. Chris and Sophia's interviews really highlighted the importance of community for me the most. Looking at the role of community in self-directed education influenced my thinking on a discussion prompt in my ETAB 640 Intro to Online Teaching course. I am seeing connections between self-directed education, rhizomatic learning, and connectivism, which I would like to explore further beyond the scope of this project. Sophia emphasized the importance of good communication between the learner and the self-directed education facilitator. When Sophia became stuck as a teenager, they hired Monica Cochran from the Self-Design Institute to help. It sounds like Monica used clarification type tools to get her unstuck. This gave me confidence in my own creative toolkit. Here are my key learnings. I like interviewing people. People like telling their story. People learn about themselves by telling their story. There is power in story, but I'm still not fully able to articulate more than that power in story just yet. Here are my action items. I'm not going to read them all. If you'd like to read them, you can always pause the video. But, and this is probably not the exhaustive list of what will still come. And here's the list of the questions I'm still asking. Again, you can pause if you want to. This is probably not exhaustive. One that I really would like to follow up on is the experience of watching interviewees learn about themselves, is the way I noticed it, as they talk, and how that might relate to the listening dialogues done by Jennifer Corey and Doug Reed at my C Conference workshop. So I'd like to follow up with them about trying to explore that together. I really enjoyed this project. I'm very glad I did it, and that's the end.